Good afternoon, Coach Luca, the Reflective Coach podcast here. I'm here with another episode in supporting mechanism for creating aspirational and high performance environments within grassroots football. I just want to touch on the environments created within grassroots and high performance, and I want to try and give a bit of context with giving some insights and experience, as well as how to create these environments that are going to benefit players. I don't want to go into too much detail in these sorts of things because we can go into too much of the science or background or the research. And I just want to provide the tools that support this, giving researchers a bit of background and scenario as to why and how these things have been created or the benefits, etc. So I could go into a lot more detail towards the end, but this is going to drop off because I just want to focus on creating aspiration, how high performance looks, our environments, and how this relates to grassroots football. Some people may question high performance and grassroots. How do those link up? Surely they should be different. Surely high performance should be academy and grassroots should be there for fun. Well, there's nothing wrong with having high performance environments within grassroots, especially dependent on the team and players that you have and what your performance indicators are within that grassroots level. So, for example, having high performance, you could be with a really good under 18s team, and the purpose of that under 18s is to develop players for the long term. Long term for the first team to try and break into the reserves to try and win cups and help bring through that aspiration for the younger squads and the high performance of stepping up between under 16s, then going into under 18s, and what life is going to look like as a seniors player looking to play for reserves and senior football representing the club, especially if a player doesn't make it professionally, but if they're playing semi-pro or playing for a very decent grassroots club in terms of the local leagues and stepping up for county divisions, etc. High performance does relate to grassroots in a number of ways. Now, as you can see here, we have Gary Speed. He was the Wales manager before, unfortunately, we lost him. But Gary had a vision for the Welsh Football FA and a vision for how it would look from grassroots right to the very top to getting the players playing for the national team. Gary wanted to create new aspirations and he wanted to create a high performance context that allowed players and young grassroots players to look up and work through the pyramid that they would wear that badge with honour and pride. Gary changed the whole concept and landscape of Welsh football and created the legacy that's being instilled with a high performance strategy that has just been released by the FAW within the last week or so. Gary Speed was one that has set off a journey and has allowed the foundations to continue to be built, which has been utilised by Chris Coleman, on to then Ryan Giggs, and has helped being forged by Ocean Roberts, now Dr. David Adams, Noel Mooney, etc., and the whole background of individuals who've been involved. But aside from that, we're now going to look at how Gary Speed implemented and created a legacy which is now allowing us within grassroots here in Wales to sort of be part of that mentality and part of that vision, and how we can support as grassroots coaches in creating that high performance environment. So, as I said, Gary changed the mentality of the environment for the Welsh setup, especially when he took over in 2010. The first words he spoke was, "We have the most organised and set up in world football." Sorry, that should read, "We have the most organised and best setup in world football." In reality, the Welsh FA didn't. The facilities weren't great. Grassroots wasn't great. There wasn't a great vision or purpose. There wasn't success at the high level for Welsh players. Players would drop off. I believe participation rates would drop in. And the game was becoming very stale in Wales. And even though it's developed over the last 10 to 12 years, there's still a long way to go here in Wales. And there's still a lot of building blocks. But within the last 10 years, there's been rapid growth compared to where it was when he took over in 2010. So what is an aspirational and high performance environment? Well, I've given some reference and background here, and this is one of the slides that I was on about where I could go into real detail and really pull out the research. But I just want to give some CLP, some continued learning program and support for grassroots coaches to start instigating how to create these environments, how to create aspiration in young footballers, how to give them ideas, how to reflect. And I don't want to go into too much detail or research because that's not the purpose of this podcast and these resources. The purpose is to try and create and instigate thinking that allows coaches to go away and then create their own thoughts and build on these platforms that they can take away back into their own practice, clubs, environments, etc. Here's a quote referenced by Eubank, Nesty, and Krushank in 2014. Sport environments, in particular high performance ones, are laden with challenging realities that impact organisational and performance team specific culture. Team specific culture should be regarded as critical components of effective and sustained working practice. Now, quite wordy in many ways. This could be read in many different formats. But let's look at a sport environment and how high performance ones in particular have so many challenges that are realistic, that have an impact on the organization and create a team specific culture. So a culture that is instilled within a team, that creates aspiration, that creates high performance, that creates goals, where there are objectives, that you're coming in and that you know the dynamic and the environment is to be the very best all the time. That you could be one of the best players excelling in one environment, but as soon as you're brought into this aspirational and high performance one, then it's being part of that culture where everything is all about high performance, and that you must be the best at least 9 out of 10 times. Whereas it's okay in your other environment to be the best 5 out of 10 times because that's all that's required of you from the environment. But this environment is minimum 9 out of 10 times. And being part of your original environment is to be aspirational to get into there, into the high performance environment. But once you're in that high performance environment, it's about having that aspiration to stay in there, to continue to be performing, to be one of the best in that group, to make sure that you stay within that group, to try and get players from a coaching perspective into that elite environment. Even if you lose players along the way and they go and play for academy teams or they play for regional setups from the governing body, for example, FAW Welsh Regional Camp. That's amazing for you as a coach to help your player progress into that high performance environment. They've always had the aspirations to do so, and now their aspiration must change in terms of their own objectives, that they want to stay part of that group and that they don't want to go back to grassroots. Now, it can be very difficult for a grassroots coach listening to this because they don't want to lose players. There's many arguments over participation levels, that they want players to remain in the grassroots game, and the whole point of the purpose is to build up and improve grassroots football. But if you've got a player who's performing exceptionally and is too good for grassroots football and has the opportunity to go and play for an academy and go and play in a regional setup, then we want the aspiration to support them as coaches doing our job. And even though they may not be allowed because they sign a contract, etc., that they can't play for the grassroots team, supporting them off the pitch and being that coaching individual who can support them through the process, especially when the process may break down for them later on in their journey, that you were there for them right throughout, that you supported their aspirations. Even though your aspirations might be for this player to remain in the grassroots game and to build up the grassroots, you should support their aspirations, because that's the key mechanism and component as a coach, is to support the aspirations of every one of your players, despite your indifferences, despite any objectives, to support and nurture the grassroots game, to increase. These are critical components that are effective for sustained work in practice. That work in practice create aspiration. That work in practice to support players in their own growth. That work in practice to allow players to go into those high performance environments. And if we're coaching at a grassroots club where you have that support, where you have the facilities, where you have a first team that you want to grow players part of, so as soon as those players start their football journey at 5, 6, 7 years of age, even if they don't make it and their dream is always play, the fact that they will go on and play for the reserves or play for the seniors, and they're going to play for that club continuously, and they're going to wear the badge with pride, and they're going to be maybe coached and managed differently when they're at seniors football, and you've done your job as a coach. The whole point is to try and create those high performance environments. You want your players to come in and enjoy. And now it does relate to those different personalities which you have within your group. The personality of those who want to be the best, always want to be the best and achieve the most. Those who are going to come in and just play football for the fun of it. Those who are pushed into football because that's what their parents and friends are doing. And those who don't mind being part of it, but they're there just to have a bit of fun, but might do their best when it matters. Now, you've got different personalities, and there's lots of CLPs and CPDs and lots of insights into personalities, and I'm going to go over this in more detail, especially how this relates into my thought process and how I manage my team and manage my football club. But this is one of the key components and mechanisms that you should be aware of, are those personalities and how you create high performance environments that achieves the best for all your players. Now, if you've got players who are there just for fun, creating a high performance environment may put them off and may deter them from playing football. So it's how you utilize your coaches and create that environment and dynamic where you have that environment where you can have players who are in their own mind, challenging themselves all the time, and the players who are having fun, but you're creating high performance environment where you want the players who just want to have fun to develop technically, where they're challenged, where they're going to be learning a lot, where despite even though what they're, when they turn 13, 14, go to high school, etc., they may go, oh, do you know what, I don't want to play league football anymore, or I just want to turn up training, see my mates, have a bit of fun. You want to create that high performance where despite that decision making by that player, they can come back at any time because they've got the ability, the understanding. They know what it's like to be in that high performance environment, and the fact that it could be a chance for them to get back in because their mentality's changed. And it's the same for any player who's been released from an academy or has been part of that regional squad. You really want to challenge them so they can be part of that high performance, to know that your club and your team is attractive, that it will help support their journey. Even if it's taken a stumbling block and they've been released, there's always an opportunity for them to go back through and try and get re-signed or get back into a regional. If there's not, it's about creating that aspiration for, again, playing for that reserves and seniors. And that's why the importance is there to try and have a reserves and seniors above you, so there's always that aspiration. Or if you're just a juniors club because you haven't got the facilities or you haven't got a clubhouse or the finances, etc., how you try and link up with the next biggest club in that area, how you try and get players to progress into the seniors, and that you create a fantastic junior setup whilst being competitive against that club in the build-up long term towards something that's aspirational. Now that's all about sustainability, partnership working and so on, and different dynamics, which is a CRP for another time, and there's lots to consider. But this is what we should be considering as coaches all the time. It's not just turning up, planning your session, delivering your session. There is so much more detail, so many more elements, so many more layers, so much that we must consider, be aware of, manage, coach, deal with, be aware of. There's so much going on as a coach all the time, especially in the grassroots game, as you want to support your players. Now, the high performance model, there are 3 key components referenced by Jones, Gittins and Hardy in 2009. These components consist of leadership, people and organisational climate. The constructs comprising the HPE model will identify from a review of the organisational performance literature in which business, sport and military domains figured prominently. Now, they took in consideration business, sport and military. So military, automatically you think discipline, organisation, drills, what's instilled in you. Sport, fun, leadership, organisation, opportunity to progress. Perhaps the money element. And how does that relate to business? Again, discipline, enthusiasm, outlook, achievement, objectives, money, and all these interlink. Now, some people may not say that money is related to military, but it's how those foundations of the background of military in terms of discipline, commitment, being part of fighting for your country, having your country on your arm, doing it for the cause. It's the same for doing it for your team, wearing your team on your heart. Now, that's going into a lot more detail, and it's what you could instill and build in terms of team building, in terms of philosophy in your club, how you work with your players. So much more there that can be considered. Again, it's that concept of playing for your club, getting into the reserves, getting into the seniors, and how you're creating those aspirations. Now, there's a lot of detail in there. I didn't want to focus on the literature too much because I just wanted to look at the 3 key components of leadership, people, and organisational climate. Now, if we look at culture, which is the underlying behaviours around everything else that's going on within the middle, culture is what happens, it's what you create, and it's how you lead up to that performance outcome and what you achieve along the way. So along the way, we want to start from the top. Performance outcome. How can we create a performance environment that allows us to achieve those performance outcomes? So whether the outcome is for that player to sign for the academy within a year's time, and that's part of his aspirations and how you can support as a grassroots coach, is how you create that environment of performance that allows them to perform, allows them to learn, allows them to be challenged, allows them to experience realities, allows them to experience difficult scenarios along the way. And that environment is key for those players, and it's key for you as a coach to enable and engage all your players to provide those environments. And along the way, we must have innovation. How are our How are the sessions innovative? How are we challenging players? Are they learning within the session? What innovation are they taking away or creating? How have they used their innovation skills? How have they developed those innovation skills? How are sessions continuing to build around the club philosophy and be different from week to week, month to month? How can they be um, full of energy? How can they be new? How can they be challenging? That balance between challenging and consistency. We don't want to be over challenging too much, and we don't want to have too much consistency in terms of we've done this exercise over and over, gaffer. We know how to do this. We're bored. We've done it. We've done it to its death, and it's about that consistency. But you want to do it enough times so when you pull it out of the hat, every once in a blue moon, then the players automatically know, oh right, we enjoyed this one, or oh we haven't done this for a long time, and you create that aspiration because they want to achieve in something they've already previously achieved in. Now it's that balance of consistency where sometimes you might have to repeat the same session 2, 3, 4 times, and that's completely fine, especially when you're working with younger age groups because you want them to achieve, you want them to understand. Now, from experience, I'd like to try and change my sessions from week to week, especially working with younger players. Again, I'd like to have that overall objective for the month, i.e., I might focus on the objective of technical for under eights, and I want to improve their ability of dribbling with the ball, and that's what my objective is. One objective for a group of under eights, especially at Grassroots. Now, I like to change it week to week, so when they're coming in, under eights, there's something new. They're learning. They're being challenged. There's lots of different activities for them to take part in. But then I've also coached as I got older and had the same different under eights group, and I might have gone with a bit of consistency and repeat the session for 2, 3 times in a row. And there's nothing wrong with that because then they've achieved their learning objectives. They're understanding and getting the grasp of what I wanted the objective to be. They're being supported in my objective in terms of achieving those technical outcomes and abilities. And there's nothing wrong with having that consistency. We need to find that balance between consistency and challenge. And now it's not talking about consistency in terms of your non-negotiables because you must be consistent in those. It's just in terms of your delivery. Well-being. How is well-being impacted? How is well-being managed? How is well-being being monitored and identified within the performance environment? How are we reviewing and supporting players? How is the well-being of your players as soon as they access sessions? Or how is their well-being if they've been released and come back into your performance environment? How is their well-being if they're just there to play for fun? Well-being covers so much, and there's those different personalities, again, which come into this well-being. How is the well-being of these different personalities being affected? Now, achievement. What is achievement and what does it look like within this performance environment? It might be the achievement for under eights of being successful to beat a player with a skill whilst dribbling with a ball as part of your objective. The achievement is that they've beaten a player. The objective is that they're able to dribble the ball. And your bonus, which is they've used their innovation, is doing a skill to beat that player. Has it improved their well-being? Yes. And does that interlink with internal processes? Yes, because you create a process of training which has allowed you to, identify and do well within your sectional organisation. And within all of that, you must look at people, which is their attitudes and beliefs, their capacity and behaviours in individual and team. Now, capacity could relate to their technical capacity. What is too challenging for them? Again, relates to their personalities. If they're there just for a bit of fun, they're not always going away wanting to learn. They're not always working with a ball away from training. Whereas some of your other players will always be with a ball. They may be in a development centre. They may be in a training with the academy. So you have the capacity of players in terms of technical. You may have capacity of learning needs and understanding, and the game intelligence that all comes with coaching and working with players, and again relates to those personalities. And then we have performance enablers, which is information. How do we enable players to develop and have that capacity to develop their capacity? How do we improve their attitudes and beliefs? Well, we give them their information. We allow them to go away and have their own purpose and their understanding. Allow them to go away and have their own beliefs, their own objectives, their own way of doing things, having the information to make their own decisions as they get older, especially on and off the pitch. As I said, if that player's chose to go and play academy football, we've given them as much information about grassroots and academy, and we've given them as much information about all the components of the game, the 4 pillars: technical, tactical, social, psychological. That all comes into it, physical, which comes into those 4 pillars. And if we've given them the information, then they can go and be aspirational. They can go and achieve. They can be part of those high performance environments and do well. What incentives do we give? Do we give for example, a small sided game at the end? Is it always part of our, session structure, and it's always part of your consistency? Or do you then start to use it as an incentive? Well, if you achieve well in this exercise and you achieve all the outcomes that I planned, and you have good behaviors and you're complying with my non-negotiables, is the incentive is to have an SSG. So then that enables their performance to be it creates that environment where you've got the players who want that SSG to go, right, come on everyone else, we must perform, we must do well, and then they're enabling the group and creating that environment of aspiration, the aspiration through an incentive of achieving that SSG. So players are automatically working harder, they want to achieve that SSG. And if you can enable performance and you can challenge your players and get your players to lead your group and be role models and bring your group together as a team, then that's what's going to enable performance as part of your people, and those behaviours as individuals and as teams. And those who are there just for fun can look at the most technical and best players and look at the players who always want to be there, the players who are leading the group, and they can say, do you know what? I want to be like them. And suddenly their behaviour starts to change. They may come for fun, but they must know they're there to learn whilst having fun. That when the coach is talking, they must listen. And then when the coach says to go off and do the exercise, then that's their time to go and have fun. Not having players who just want to have fun. They're not going to listen to the coach. They're not going to take the information on board. And then therefore, they're not going to have incentives for themselves. They're not going to have the opportunity to achieve that information which fits into their belief of, do you know what, if the opportunity of an academy came and asked for me, and I'm a player who just likes to have a bit of fun, but this opportunity has come and I must change my attitude, then I must use the information that coach gave me all the times that I was there just to have fun. And there's so much we can consider and so much that we must layer into our sessions that are really beneficial. Now, there are some key themes, and I'd like to put Roy Keane here because Roy Keane is a performance enabler. He's someone who always led on the pitch. He's someone who always expected and wanted the best from all of his players and teammates. He's someone that expected the high performance of his managers and all the players around him. He created aspiration for the younger players to look up and play like him. He created a high performance environment in terms of boundaries, discipline, non-negotiable standards, expectations. Now, there's some key themes which have been referenced by Mills, Butt, Maynard and Hardwood in 2014, which should be identified and considered in the planning of the sessions, and especially when we're looking at a holistic view, and we want to make sure these sessions fit in part of the development pathway of creating that aspiration and those environments. These key themes include defined core values, a coaching philosophy, behavioural standards, promoting whole person development, empowering all of your key stakeholders, creating a sense of ownership and relatedness, forming of positive relationships, prioritisation of player well-being, maintenance of club operations, commitment and innovation, effective communication, construction of achievement-focused climates with opportunities to progress, strong, dynamic and organisation cultures within setups. Now, there's a lot of key themes to consider there, especially as a coach and especially as a manager, and how you layer in and achieve all these key themes with your team long term. For example, I've had my team for 6.5 years now. I've defined what my core values are and the core values of the team, which have now led into our club core values as we've now founded our own club within the last year. Through that, we've created a coaching philosophy, which is the Wolfpack philosophy. We do this all together. No one's left behind. We win, we draw, we lose together. Everything's about being as one collective, moving forward, being strong, being a wolf, being cubs that are being nurtured and then challenged as they get into this, into these new environments which create aspiration. I've created behavioural standards. What I expect from players as soon as they come into the sessions, especially on and off the pitch, what I expect of them, of how they represent the club, how they represent us as coaches, whether they're shaking hands at the end of every game, how they're turning up the venues, that the fact they're wearing their coaching kit, all those behaviours which come into it, whilst promoting whole person development, that we're focused on the players, that they must be given every opportunity for when any opportunity or any situation that they face later on in their life comes to them, that it's all about them and they're in a position to make that choice. And every time, and even if it doesn't work out, it's and they come back to the club, it's about their personal development. How can they come straight back in? How can they learn? How can they achieve? How can they fit back into the team? How can we empower our stakeholders? So this is, for example, how we can utilise our parents and spectators, how they can create high aspiration, how they can support these environments which create high performance learning, where there's challenges, where players can be supported, where parents must understand players must come in and they're going to be challenged, where players aren't always going to come away happy because these environments have been challenging. And challenging is something which fits in part of developing resilience. And it may break your heart at times, but without these challenges, you're not going to become a stronger person. You're not going to become a stronger player. You're not going to develop this mindset. So utilising your stakeholders and parents to go, do you know what? You're going to be challenged in there. It's going to be tough, but I'm going to support your coach. And then if we're finding it difficult, then we'll have a conversation at home and how you can create that link between home and football and how you can support the coach. Obviously, if your coach is screaming at the kid all the time, then that's a complete different situation. We're talking about a high performance and environment and how we can empower our key stakeholders, which fits into forming positive relationships. How can we form positive relationships with all of our stakeholders to create these aspirations, to create the environments, to define the core values that support behaviour, that that is centered all around their child, but is always in the back of their mind that whole person development is being focused on here. So despite these challenges, despite upsets, despite heartbreak at times, it's all part of their long-term development. And when they're a senior and they're representing that club, this whole journey has been worth it. Creating a sense of ownership and relatedness. Can I relate to the players around me? Can I relate to the club? Have I had brothers or sisters that play for the club? If they haven't, can I relate to the club and create standards for when I've got a younger brother or I've got my children coming through at the club, that they can relate to it? But in that meantime, I relate to the club because they've created high performance. They've created an environment of learning. I relate to that. I want to learn. I want to come here. I've never played football before. My teammates have been here for 6 years. This is entirely new for me. I'm not going to be as technically gifted as them as such, or maybe not as technically gifted, but as technically developed. And can I take ownership for my own learning? Can I take ownership for everything that I do on a pitch? If the coach asks me to relay some information back, or next week I can't give the information back in feedback, then I haven't took ownership of my learning, and that's entirely down to me and what I must be aware of, and that's how I'm going to develop. Again, prioritisation of player well-being. We've focused on that. Maintenance of club operations. If everything's not running sound behind the scenes, you're not getting to your session and you're setting up as soon as players and parents get there. And it's not looking defined, it's not looking organised, then your operations behind the scene aren't going to create high performance. They aren't going to create aspirations, because players are going to be like, well, coach has just got you, we'll just get you. Whereas if players are coming in going, oh, do you know what, coach set up, everything's ready to go, we're ready to start here, ready to transition in between what's happening, then I want to turn up early. If my coach can turn up early, I can. And that's my argument with players. When players say, I can't get you earlier, well, you can. Obviously, understanding that the fact that there is literally an under 11 can't drive themselves to training, or they got siblings and from different backgrounds, i.e. single parents, etc., that they may physically not be able to get there early. But as players get older, i.e. when they're 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s, and so on, and they can take that ownership and they've got their own opportunity for independence, then if they say, oh, I can't get you earlier despite circumstances, then I say, well, I got here early, so can you. And that's my argument all the time with players. If you can, I can. If I can, you can. And that two-way street, and that creates that aspiration, that creates that environment, that empowers players, that I build a positive relationship. I'm automatically defining what my values are, what my behavioural standards are as well within them. I expect them to have good behaviours by turning up early. Turning up on time is good, but I prefer you there early, and that's my expectation. Without saying it, that's my expectation, and they have to learn and be part of that. Having that commitment and innovation. If there's no innovation around the club, or no innovation in sessions, or you're not empowering players to have innovation when they're on the pitch, then everything's going to go stale. You want there to be innovation. You want to create this environment which creates that aspiration where they can do new things and achieve things that they've never done, or where they can go and try something which they've been taught or they've seen, or they just want to have the opportunity to practice. That communication, that two-way street again, those relationships, stakeholders, how you work with them, what sort of information you relay, and how you create these environments. Then how do you construct your achievement-focused climates? So my climate within the next year, we're going to focus on achievement, and the achievement is going to be winning the league. How do we construct an environment that is built around winning a league? How do we have players coming in from, especially for the age group I have now, who are transitioning from 11s to 12, so they're going from mini football to competitive. How do we change that environment? Even though we've always had high aspirations, and we've had high performance in terms of always wanting to be the best, how do we now change from going minis into achievement-focused climate, where we have those conversations where players could be not coming on just for minutes now, but it could be tactical changes. And it's how we also manage those minutes and manage participation, but also trying to get the best for everyone and starting to allow them to understand, well, changes will have to be made tactically and carefully where we can win the game, because it's about us doing it as a collective. And that when you get older, and as you get older, you won't always be able to have minutes, and that's the balance between participation and then tactical. And that's what's hard as a grassroots coach to sort of manage and be aware of, especially when everything's all about participation. Of course, I would have an argument with a coach if they they brought a player on every week, last 10 minutes, and he said that was a tactical change, because no, it isn't. I could understand if it was one game, right, you're losing 3-2, you got your best players on, you haven't got your most technical players on the bench, and you've got to get your player on at some point, and if you give them 10 minutes at the end, they've participated, they've been part of that, but they haven't massively impacted the game. It's about how you can shape it so that they can impact the game. How then you manage, do they start next week and then you can bring on your more technical players to change or influence the game? Have you got a team that's not as physical or not as technical as the other team from the week before? And these are some key considerations, and there's a lot to consider and achieve as a coach, and how you manage that as part of that. And you must have a strong dynamic and organisation culture within your setups that allows you to sort of manage those key considerations, to manage those scenarios, to manage those situations that you're going to face. Now, player influences, psychological and behavioural factors are largely shaped by environment experiences. But et al. 2014. Now, I remember listening to the High Performance podcast with Jake Humphries and Dr. Damian Hughes, where they were interviewing Rio Ferdinand. And it's always stuck in my mind what Rio Ferdinand said: you are a product of your environment. And that's exactly what I want. And that's what I always consider in everything that I do. And, personally, professionally, within football and so on. How does this shape me? Am I a product of this environment that I've become part of? Am I creating products of the environment that I'm creating? And it's all about the environment of wanting to achieve, to have high aspirations, to allow players to make their own choices, despite, I don't want to lose them as they get older. But if they go on and say, do you know what, Luca, I want to go and play academy football, or I want to go play for this team because they've won the league for the last 2 years. We haven't done so well as a team tactically because we're lacking the depth in the squad. I want to go join them. Then I'd be like, well, I've created an environment which has empowered you to make your own decision, and I've done my bit as a coach, because you're not moving on because you're saying, oh, I dislike you, Luca. It's because you want to go and have those aspirations of winning the league, and you've seen the team do it, and you may have forged relationships as a player. So, if you want to be a product of that environment of success, of winning a league, or you want to be a product of a team that's always fighting, always striving, and hopefully will win a league because we're lacking that depth and we must work with the players we have, then these are some of our environmental factors and experiences that players may bring to us, and we must be aware of. Players are influenced by their peers, their coaches, parents, carers, family, previous experiences, environmental experiences, intrinsic values and beliefs, and role models. Now you can read into those areas a lot more from yourself and consider, and this is what I really want you to, as listeners and as coaches, to sort of go away and reflect on, is how a player is influenced by, and sort of make your own notes, and then sort of build this into your management, into your coaching, and for, to be aware of your players. But I definitely like you to consider these areas and go away and write about them, and then a year later write about them again, for example, and how this may have changed, or how you might use one player and then reflect with them. There's so many different ways you can do this, but I definitely recommend writing these down, being aware of them, and how they contribute to your environment and creating those aspirations. Now, I'm not going to say too much more on this because I think I've laboured the point and I've covered a lot of what I wanted to. But these are definitely some key considerations. I can go into a lot more depth, but definitely go away and write about them and how they contribute to your environment and those aspirations. Now, some learning styles and coaching, which has been referenced by Mills, Butt, Maynard, and Hardwood in 2014 again, that can support these environments and create these aspirations, which is going to fit in part of another CLP as part of this podcast, which I want you to, listen to and certainly be aware of and instill within your own coaching. But it's question answer. Facilitation of guided discovery learning, just allowing the players to go out there and play their game and do something different, to not have those objectives, to sort of figure things out for themselves, to problem solve, to just enjoy being with the ball, and just guiding them through a journey whilst they're in that session. Not too many transitions, not too many objectives, not too much information, not too much structure at times, but just guiding them through nicely through a session where they can learn, where they can participate, where they can have a bit of fun, and that balance between challenge and consistency, as well as then empowering them to have fun. And if you've had 15 consistent sessions of high performance and the high standards, and you've had very little fun, then maybe on the 16th, 17th, 18th session it's just about fun, just bringing down these barriers that players may have created, just breaking down the psychological challenges they've endured, just having that breather and letting the gates down, just letting off some steam, which is really important, and just having guided discovery learning can fit in really nicely with that. Problem solving opportunities. How can players create problems, and then how can they problem solve in the session themselves? How can they have that independence? How can they learn? How can they develop resilience? How can they problem solve? How can they be a leader? How can they work as teams? And there's so much in terms of problem solving that can be instilled within sessions. Now, strategies for players to become more aware of their performance and development. Again, that communication, that two-way street, that developing those key relationships, developing relationship with stakeholders to involve mums, dads, families, carers, etc. And then creating that understanding of performance and development, understanding where they need to continue on in development, understanding what their IDPs are, understanding that some of the feedback given might be brutally honest, but it's needed for their own development, and that they must, continue to develop to increase their performance, especially if they have aspirations and if you have aspirations for them. And now I talk from obviously a grassroots coach, and I mix this up with my academy experience. But you may be sitting here listening as an academy coach going, well, my aspiration for my players to always be the best, and to try and sign a scholarship and try and break into the first team in Newport County, for example. And it's about how you utilize this information, how you reflect, how you listen, how you take on board some of the feedback, etc., and how you evolve the thinking around your own coaching practices and take this away. I know I keep mentioning grassroots because that's where my major focus is on right now, and how to support grassroots coaches, and this fits in nicely with the CLP program that I run at the football club as head of coaching, and they're all grassroots coaches, and it's about how we can create those aspirations for those coaches to not just go, oh, well, I'm just a dad. No, you're a coach, and you're there to create those high aspirations. And it's not just about, putting on a session and going, oh, do you know what, we put one on. It's about going, do you know what, I'm a dad and a coach, but whilst I'm at football, I'm a coach, and I want these high aspirations. I want to achieve success, and that I've got a commitment to the club. I can relate to it. This increasing awareness of the coaching environment. Again, if players have realised that you're there early, that you're set up, that you're organised, they're going to be aware of the coaching environment and what the commitment you've given them. And this creates that aspiration. But again, there's so much here, and this is what you can reflect on as coaches and how you take this into your sessions, into your practice, into your delivery, and definitely areas for you to consider and build upon. Now, just one last slide. High performance environments of psychology. This is the last slide, but this could be so much detail and research and background into this. But I just wanted to pick up onto it just to finish off on and just to allow you to go away and think about things. Psychologists have encountered high performance environments of elite athletes in the Premier League, observing performance enhancement, cultural experiences, and philosophies that are practical concepts for elite professional sports teams within organisational practices. Now, I'm talking about Premier League there and elite, and you could be going, well, what's this got to do with grassroots? Well, I just wanted to highlight and say what high performance is. And even though that's high performance with an elite organisation, an elite environment, there's nothing to say why can't we have cultural experiences or philosophies that are practical concepts at grassroots football. How does our practice look like within our organisation? How does our organisation instill all these areas? How do we create aspiration? At high level sports psychologists will encounter at least some of the following culturally driven challenges. 1. Interdepartmental communication problems. 2. Coach-athlete conflict. 3. Interference from stakeholders. Elite level is owners. 4. Additional pressures from an elite environment, which includes media and financial. Now, you could be an academy coach, or you could be at a higher level, and this is giving you an opportunity to go away and do some more research, or for you to reflect, or find some further support, or to get in touch with me about what these high performance indicators look like, what these high performance and elite environments look like, and how they differ, and how they can interlink from grassroots to elite, and how we can support players in grassroots and create that partnership network along the way. Much to consider, much to think on. Reflect on this slide and take away what you will. But I hope you've enjoyed it. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Coach Luca, the Reflective Coach Podcast. As always, if you want to reach out to me, drop me a message, subscribe, get in touch any way you want. We can always catch up. I'm always up for networking with coaches and learning and building on this and utilising other coaches and those who are involved in the game, not necessarily coaches, but psychologists, etc., who want to talk about players and take this to the next concept. I'm always up for that. But I always talk from my experience, what I've achieved, what I want to achieve, my aspirations myself as a coach. And these are just some of the key considerations and factors. But I hope you enjoyed this episode, and hopefully you can make some notes and take a lot away, and hopefully you can, build upon your sessions, your practice, your delivery as you move forward. But as ever, Coach Luca, the Reflective Coach Podcast. Hope everyone takes care and hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much.